In this episode, we show you why saying no, why being firm about it and saying no will help you win the deal against people who know how to negotiate. Hello, Sales Nation, and welcome to today's episode of the Salesman Podcast. And on today's show, we have Chris Voss. He is an ex-FBI hostage negotiator. He's an author of the book, Never Split the Difference, which you can find on Amazon. On today's show, he's showing how we, sales professionals, can negotiate against procurement officers, the C-suite, essentially people who are trained in negotiation, much like us. Everything that we talk about is available in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. With all that said, let's jump right in. Chris, welcome back to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be on with you. They're fun and interesting conversations.
I appreciate that, mate, and thank you for coming back on. Thanks for sharing your time. And I'm intrigued in this one because in the previous episodes, which I'll link to in the show notes, and if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be in the description box below. In the previous episodes, we've perhaps done more of a 101 of negotiation, and then I asked you a whole bunch of nerdy questions that I was just super curious on as well. So I want to take this a step further now. I think we can somewhat assume that most people have listened to the previous episodes. And they know somewhat, even if they only half listen to them, they've got somewhat of a gist of the process that you described of, you know, going for the win-win and all this good stuff, and some of the cliched stuff in negotiations as well that you clarified for us in the previous ones. In this episode, I want to dive into negotiating with people who know how to negotiate. So I got a lot of feedback from the audience of, hey, I'm new to sales and I'm essentially up against a procurement officer who has been negotiating with salespeople for 20 years and they just dominate me. The conversations are awkward. They get everything that they want. And I feel like I've left the conversation. I feel like I've left the negotiation not putting my best self forward, not giving the best representation of myself, the company, the product, and all that good stuff. So the first thing is that I'm going to ask you, and this might cut the conversation short. Is negotiating with someone who doesn't know how to negotiate different than negotiating with someone who does know the process, the techniques, the tactics?
Well, yeah, let's dive into these procurement guys and gals, if you will, because, you know, they are sort of the dark side of the force. They are the you know, the Sith, you know, they are the dark side, the Darth Vaders. And what I mean by that is, here's a couple givens. A procurement guy or gal is going to make you say no, whether you like it or not, which means they're going to take some sort of emotional intelligence approach on the dark side, which is going to be guilt. You know, they're going to be attacking. You know, there's kind of two types. There's, you know, the international kidnapper, who is an intimidating type of negotiator, makes a lot of threats, stamps on the table. I mean, their emotional intelligence tactic is fear and intimidation. They kind of got one move there. There's another one. I happen to be dealing with some procurement people myself right now, and they really remind me of the frequent callers on the crisis hotlines, where they're just going to wear you down and try to make you feel bad, and all this is so disappointing. But whatever their dark side emotional intelligence approach is, the objective is they're not going to let up until not only you've said no, but you have to say no at least 3 times to these people, which is why it's very important just to protect yourself, to develop the ability to say no elegantly, to maintain a positive attitude, because it keeps you smarter. As soon as this begins to wear you down, these negative things actually begin to slow down your ability to think. You obsess about the conversation. You know, what did I do wrong? You know, how did it get derailed? I mean, they pick 1 or 2 or 3 ways to just push you as hard. And then the hard part is they're not going to let up until you've said no several times. Because if you haven't said no, what they feel is there's more to be had. That's their gauge till you say no, until you get really upset. I can remember a long time ago, I came across, you know, one of the classic names in negotiation, Roger Dawson, and he had a program that I don't think has changed in the 40 years since it came out, called The Secrets of Power Negotiation. And it really was push the other side till they get upset. And he talked about one example where he was wearing down someone in a bargaining situation until finally the other person got mad and said, "I can't sell it to you for that. I'd lose money if I sold it to you for that. And he was like, all right, awesome. I pushed you to your limit. You've gotten really upset. You've said no adamantly. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for an emotional, reactive no, where you really mean no. And then they say to themselves, all right, awesome. Inside, they're like, I now know I did my job. I got every last dime on the table. I got every clause that's going to kill you. And they besides price, there's a lot of clauses they want that you're not going to like. I sent an email to one of these people just 2 days ago. And I said, I have some real problems with this and be happy to talk it through with you. And if there are 5 sentences. And I said, go through each one of these with me line by line and let me know how they are. The reaction I got was they waited 2 days before responding, which means now shortly I know that pretty soon they're going to say time is of the essence. We really want to get you paid. There's time here. Well, if there was time here, they wouldn't have waited two days to respond. They're using time as a weapon on me. This is a tactic. They're trying to push me really hard. And I said, look, I'm happy to talk about each one of these clauses. And the reaction was, I'm really disappointed. We worked really hard. We've tried so hard for you. Everybody else has signed and had no problem. And it seems like after all this time and effort we put in, you have, and so this is one guilt trip after another, which interestingly enough doesn't respond to a single one of my concerns. I'm like, okay, all right, this is the tactic, and they had done some of this to us early on. Now, and I don't mind dealing with procurement negotiator because there's a deal to be had here. And it reminds me a lot of why I joined the suicide hotline in the first place, because I went there because I wanted to learn how to deal with difficult people.
It's a challenge, right?
It's a wonderful challenge.
Yeah.
Because it's a gateway to improving your negotiation skills, and it's a great opportunity for self-reflection on what they've done to you. And if I read this as is, I feel kind of lousy here. I've disappointed them. They've worked really hard. Everybody else signs. What's wrong with you? I mean, if you told your mom when you were a kid you wanted to do it because all the other kids are doing it, she'd say, well, if Johnny wanted to jump off the roof, would you want to jump off the roof?
My mum would always say, if X wanted to put their hand in the fire, would you do the same?
Right, exactly. And so here we are as adults. But a lot of this stuff, the dark side of emotional intelligence, this guilting, this, oh my God, I've worked so hard for you. There's some ethnicities that this is a mother-in-law approach. For once you could make me happy. Because this stuff works.
Let me ask you, Chris, before we go any deeper in this, because I don't want to gloss over. I've wrote down 4 or 5 things here that I think there's real practical takeaways for the audience from understanding these. So we're in this scenario. We'll use Chris, the salesman. In my world, he's selling medical devices to the NHS. The NHS are trained procurement officers. So the surgeon's on board. They want to play with the new toys, but the procurement officer's holding everyone up in this deal. So a few things here. One, should we engineer a no into the conversation so that we can just get past that point? Or does it have to be, do they have to feel like they've really, truly pushed us? Or are they looking just to tick a box that we've said no?
First of all, do they have to feel like they've really, truly pushed us? Yes. The deal's not going to be made until they have. I mean, in international kidnapping, we used to say, when are the kidnappers going to release the hostage? As soon as they feel they've gotten everything they can. So our goal to get an early release as soon as possible is to make them feel like they worked really hard. Asking a lot of open-ended questions. We had to learn how to say no elegantly, deferentially to people that would kill our hostages. Somebody's going to kill your deal, theoretically. Now, a procurement officer is not going to kill the deal. Procurement officer's got a finite amount of time that they have to pass this on because there is a surgeon who's waiting for this equipment. Procurement guy or gal's job is to jump into the negotiation in a finite period of time and pound you as hard as they can and then pass the deal on. Now, they're going to pound you with anger. They're going to pound you with guilt. But they have a limited amount of time, which is why they're going to waste time And then they're going to say, we're running out of time. Well, they are. And that's why you want to, with your ability to say no, it still always requires taking the high road with tactical empathy and saying like, wow, one of the responses when somebody's upset with us because they're so disappointed, we'll return and say like, wow, this really seems like a slap in the face, doesn't it? Really seems like you put all this time and effort into this and you worked really hard for us and we're disappointing you and we're just it seems like we slapped you in the face with this. We're gonna preempt, we're gonna be proactive, and we're gonna make them feel like they worked really hard, and we're gonna maintain the relationship with empathy while simultaneously saying no. I'm sorry, this just doesn't work for us.
Do we say no with emotion? Do we get riled up? Are we passionate? Or are we trying to be deadpan, calm, professional, and not, I guess that takes personality out of it a little bit as well. Is that the best way to go about it?
So there has to be an emotionally intelligent way to say no. And so instead of with passion, with anger, our emotionally intelligent way to say no was to first exercise some tactical empathy. I'm sure it seems like this is a real slap in the face. And then deferentially and apologetically, I'm sorry, this just doesn't work for us. So we're indicating an ongoing desire to continue to collaborate. We're not trying to slam any doors. We're not trying to escalate by getting angry. The other thing we're trying to do is we're not trying to take the low road, because I could email this person back and say, you know what, I'm disappointed too. What that gets us back into is this sequential move game where I'm the second mover on this emotional level. And the very best I could do is tie. I don't want to tie. I want to continue to have a great deal. I want to win. I don't want these clauses in the contract. I don't want to cut my own throat by discounting. But, if I haven't found a way to pleasantly, nicely say no, they're not going to let up. They're just not. It's not their job. That's not what they're trained to do. They're just trying to do their job. It's not personal. When she says she's disappointed, she's not really disappointed. She just knows it's a great way to get away.
When you say, sorry, I'm interrupting here, but there's loads to go at and I don't want to gloss over anything. When you say it's their job, is this a leverage point for us in that we know that to perhaps get to a procurement person, the deal is pretty much done, the needs, the desires, the service offering, most of the time that is all sorted and arranged and you're negotiating over the numbers, aren't you, at this point? Particularly in my background dealing with the NHS, the surgeon wants this equipment, we've planned it all out. It's going to be, £1 million for this full theatre refurb. They need the refurb. The costs have been offset against the money that they're going to save over the next 5 years. All this, the stuff that we talk about on the show all the time. When we get to the procurement officer, do we have more leverage than what we think perhaps on the surface level we do, in that if they don't sort this deal out within that 2-3 week month period, as you described before, the surgeon's going to kick off, they're going to lose patients further down the line. Are we okay to put some of this on them and, perhaps keep control of the responsibility or self-responsibility, but within their organization, allow them to have a bit of the flack for this being a slow process?
When you first are contacted with procurement is involved, there's only one or two possibilities. You're either the one they really, really want, or they're never going to give you the deal, and they just want you to discount as much as possible to drive the other guy's price down. How
do we know then? Because this is super important. And again, I'm interrupting. I apologize. So I had this in the NHS. The over a certain value, like £50,000 or £55,000, any deal would have to go to tender. So if you were leading, and most of the time we were, just as the company I worked for was the company everyone wanted to buy products from, surgeon-wise, we would always then write clearly specifications into the tender, get procurement on side, get them to put the specifications in there to beat out the competition. And it would be stupid stuff like this monitor refreshes at 60 hertz rather than 50 hertz, so you get a better image, and that would have to be written in. So that's kind of a tactic that we would do when the procurement team was on board. But if you're going into this and you're slightly blinder than that, you've been asked to go to tender, is there a way to suss out whether you're really in the competition here? Because clearly there's a whole bunch of these occasions where you probably just want to cut your losses and spend your time more on the lower hanging fruit rather than go into a battle where you're at the bottom of the hill and they're up there with lasers, machine guns, and God knows what else, and they're just going to dominate you. So how do we know when we go into these scenarios whether we've actually got a shot or not with the procurement team?
You got to get past the first time you said no. You have to express no with tactical empathy and elegantly one time, right up front. If they come back and continue to negotiate, they want you.
Cool.
If you are there just to drive the price down and you're never going to get the deal, they're not going to waste any more time with you because they're busy people. Which is another reason why you have to elegantly say no, because you have to get past the first hurdle. No, one way or another, you're not proceeding without gently, elegantly using one of the ways to say no. You're just not. And that's your first hurdle. That's your first objective. Find out whether or not you're in the deal or you're out of the deal. If they continue to talk to you after the first no, wow, you're the preferred vendor. If they don't talk to you after the first no, you never were. And you need to go make a deal that you can make.
Love it. That makes total sense. I love it when it's binary. Obviously, it could be more than one no, I guess, and you can gauge it and judge it yourself. But that's a somewhat binary way to judge this, which is amazing, Chris. I appreciate that. Who is in control of these conversations? And both from really who's in control and the perception of control as well.
Right, and that's exactly the point, the perception of control. The secret to gaining the upper hand in a negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. So if you want to wear them out, which you have to do, if you want to make them feel like they've gotten everything they could get, they have to feel like they established control. And that's the reason why deference is such a powerful skill, especially with these guys. The international kidnappers, the terrorists, the killers, the murderers, the sociopaths we dealt with them with deference and a tactical application of empathy, and we wore them out. Another one of my favorite international negotiators was a UN guy that got all the hostages out of Beirut in the 1980s. Hezbollah was on the other side. They were kidnapping everywhere. And one of his rules was the secret to negotiation is learning how to exhaust the other side. That the procurement guy or gal is going to try to exhaust you into submission. And that's why, we're so disappointed. We've worked so hard. Oh, my God. Everybody else is doing this. That's designed to exhaust you into submission. Your job is to exhaust them, but with a different approach, not with the dark side of emotional intelligence, with deference, with saying no. How are we supposed to do that? I like very much. I'll outline my concerns and I'll say, I'm sorry. It just doesn't work for us. If I have to put it in an email, I'll go out of my way to put I'm sorry in a bunch of times. I'm sorry, I'm afraid, we can't do this. I will narrow my rejections to the points and not to the person. And I'll narrow it in a way where it's not going to be taken personally, unless they're really trying to clobber me with disappointment. If I say, I'm sorry, this doesn't work for me, and they say, oh, I'm so disappointed, we're running out of time, well, you're sloughing off my emotional intelligence because you really have no interest in having a working relationship with me. Your procurement, your job is to beat me up one way or another in a finite period of time and then pass me on the next stage.
When you say wear someone out, do you very literally mean that you get to the point where the person that you're negotiating with just goes, whether it's in their head or to their boss or whoever the end user is, they go, I can't be bothered dealing with this dude anymore. The deal's as good as it's going to get. I don't want to stress. I've got other things to do. We're not getting anywhere. Because that's almost frustration, and that almost seems like a negative place to be. And clearly, we're all trained as salespeople to be happy, to always have a smile on our face, to give value. That overworked, cliched phrase. Are we really driving people to the point of frustration just to get them out of the picture so we can move forward?
Yeah, that's a good distinction to draw, because we're not trying to get them. There's a difference between frustrating them and making them feel like they've gotten everything they can. And they're going to feel like they've gotten everything they can when they've heard no several times. And that's why the first response is, how are we supposed to do this? It wears them out, but it doesn't make them angry at you. We are not trying to focus the negative reaction on us. We're trying to make them feel like they did their job. And the conversation you talk about is really a very important conversation. Because if they go back to their boss and they say, I'm really frustrated with these guys, I just can't get anywhere with them, the boss is going to say, get back in there and get a discount.
Yeah.
He's going to yell at them. But if they go to the boss and they say, you know what, I've pushed these people as far as I can. I got them at their limit. I have put them through the ringer, and I pushed them as hard as I possibly can. And the boss is going to say, all right, good job. Pass it on, make the deal. So the secondary conversation away from the table is very important, and one we have to be conscious of. And that's why the deferential approach is very important, because they need to not be frustrated with us, but they need to feel like they've done their job. But it's not going to get done otherwise. It's just not.
And do we enable them to do that by, of course, saying no, being the positive energy if they're trying to emotionally bully us? Do we do it by almost giving in and just... Because I can imagine, as we're going through this, I can imagine an email that gets sent from us to them saying, almost, this is all I can give you. Like, you've done a great job. You've worked me to the bone. And if you're charismatic enough, you could probably say this on a phone call or in person as well of, you've done it. You've crushed it. My boss is annoyed at me because of the discount that we're giving you. You've leveraged us the best you can. Is that how we try and wrap this process up? Because clearly it could go on for a long period and it's not productive for either side. Are we almost giving? Is there an opportunity to give in, and put that across without sounding weak?
I don't like giving in. But
what I mean by that, Chris, is like we're strategically giving in, as in we know this is where we want to be, and so we're happy to say, that's all the discount we can give, or whatever the scenario is. Trying to force them into saying, okay, we'll accept that then.
I wouldn't take that tactical approach. I mean, my approach is, look, you guys have been very generous. You've been wonderful with us. We're flattered that you picked us out at all. I mean, you're a major international company. You're wonderful. You're well known. A long-term relationship would be incredibly valuable to us. What I want to articulate the things that are going on in the back of their head as to why I should give in. And I'm going to say those things. I'm going to take the wind out of their sails. I'm going to express it first. I'm going to leave them with nowhere to go. I'm going to be very positive. I don't want to act, because they're going to sniff out the same game they're playing. They're going to sniff that out. And that's why if somebody tells me they're disappointed, my response is like, well, I'm disappointed too. I mean, that's their tactic. And it does me no good to be the second mover in their tactics. And that's why if we retain, what are they thinking on the other side? Why are the reasons that we should give in? I'm going to articulate those reasons. They're going to think that they've worked really hard for me. If they've worked really hard, they think they've been generous. They've gone out of their way. I'm going to say, look, you've been so generous. You've so gone out of your way on this. You've so treated us so special. I'm going to cite all the reasons that they're going to give for me making this deal. And then I'm going to say, I'm sorry. It just doesn't work for me. Different ways. The ways to say no is, I just can't do that. I'm sorry. You're generous. It doesn't work for me. I'm afraid that just doesn't work. How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to maintain our ability to move forward? I'm gonna say no, imply no. Really, the key is really implying no, and having to know when I have to do it multiple times. And continuing to take the high road so that they don't feel they lost. You get into an offer, counter-offer, a tactic, counter-tactic at their level, then it gets into a win-lose thing for them, which digs them in because they're used to winning. And plus, if you haven't, when I was doing kidnappings in Haiti, Haitian kidnappers only settled on the weekend. I know that sounds stupid, but they only settled on weekends because they parted on weekends. And they were hungover and recovering on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They're getting, literally getting over the weekend. I could offer a Haitian kidnapper. I could have the family offer the Haitian kidnapper full ransom on a Monday or Tuesday, and they're never going to take it because they got a finite period of time where, for whatever reason, the time pressure that they feel, they want to party on the weekend.
Should we use that then, Chris? Should we be having these conversations on a Friday and essentially setting it up that, right, let's just get it all wrapped up before the end of the day and then we don't need to think about it and it's all done by the weekend? Is that a tactic that we should be using as well?
Our counterpart is going to use time against us, and time is a weapon. And there's nothing wrong with allowing that timing to work for us as well. And I've got conversations that are getting ready to drag into, I expect a tremendous amount of pressure on this negotiation I'm in now in 24 more hours because we're going to get closer to the weekend. I know it's going to happen. So I'm okay with that. I'm going to use time the same way. So short answer to your question is yes, that's just fine.
Amazing. And two final things on this, and then we'll start to wrap it up, Chris. Should we proactively be taking, the word you use, taking the wind out of their sails? In that I envisioned that if price is going to come up, you could, in your initial proposal or as it gets to procurement, you could say, we did this with this company. This is the price. It worked for them. They got great ROI. And try and almost take some of the power that they've got to negotiate off the table. Should we be proactively doing this and strategically doing this before we even get into the negotiation itself?
Well, I first of all, the concept of being proactive is always a good idea. Then the next question is, what are you going to be proactive on? If you're already cutting your price before you get into the conversation, then that just makes them hungry. They smell more.
Yes, I've got this image of wolves or coyotes just like pulling at a body, kind of like pulling at the weak animal off the back of the pack when you say that.
Yeah. They, in trying to explain to them how you've already discounted the price, what they read in their head is like, all right, they're in a discounting mindset. Excellent. We want them thinking that way. And they're going to try to get it at that point in time. They're going to try to get us to start to bid against ourselves, which is why with this whole thing, like, oh, I'm so disappointed, or I've worked so hard, or we want you so much, or, what's a long-term relationship with us worth? I had another procurement person say, wow, a long-term relationship with us isn't worth more than that. That's like, why don't you love me more? I love you a long time. So, they're trying all these crazy, dark side tactics to get us to feel guilty and give in. And they're tactics. These are, procurement is raised the level. A lot of, they're not pounding the tables and yelling at us as much as they used to. But they're using emotional intelligence tools, the guilt ones, to avoid the issues and to get us to give in, to wear us out, to make us feel like we've worked really hard. And again, they're not going to let up until we basically go, I can't make that deal. We'd lose money. And they're like, all right, that's where we want it to be. Excellent. Let's make the deal now. They're going to go there.
On the making of a deal, and I want to hear from the hostage side of things as well here. Is this a light bulb moment? Is this, right, we've done it, we're happening? Or is it a gradual chess match would probably be the other way to describe it, of move, counter move, and then it gradually fades into, I think we're about done here, and then obviously there's one or two calls of actions or an email that would move it to the next step, whether that goes to finance or wherever it goes. So is it this long? No, that's the wrong way to describe it. Is it a gradual fade into a deal being done, or is it this is it, we're done, let's move on with things? And especially, I want you to comment on the hostage side of things as well.
They're going to have to feel like they put in the time. You scheduled a 30-minute call. They're not going to be happy unless they've kept you on the phone for 2 hours, and you've excused yourself from the call at least one time to talk it over, because those are the earmarks. So what you want to do is you want to compress that time frame as much as you can by wearing them out. When you go from deference and essentially, they're using passive aggression on you because it works, and you're going to need some passive aggression with them. How am I supposed to do that? What are we supposed to do? How am I supposed to answer that? Lots of what and how questions. So what you really need to do is you need to wear them out as quickly as you can. And I'm not entirely sure I answered your question.
I was just getting out of, is this you wear them out, and more recent research shows that we've only got so much willpower, for example, and then it's depleted. It's a gas tank. There's only a finite amount of it. And then you start making stupid decisions towards the end of the day, like binge drinking and binge eating, especially towards the weekend. But what I'm getting at is the decision that they decide that they've got as much as they can, is it, their willpower is depleted, they go, okay, we're done? Or is it they go, all right, well, we'll see how we are tomorrow, and then we'll see how we are tomorrow, and that could be, I'll see where we are in an hour's time, or we'll let them sweat. Is it a binary yes or no, or is it something that kind of like just fades into existence?
It fades in a little bit more for them. They don't have an unlimited amount of time, but while they've got time left, they're not going to stop pushing you while they have time left. It's just not going to happen unless, of course, you've given in on everything and there's nothing left to push you on. And at that point in time, they say, okay, wash their hands, we're good. So they're going to get everything they get. The only way the process is going to stop is they're going to run out of time, or they get everything. One of two things. And there's going to be a finite period of time. I want to exhaust them in that finite period of time, or they're going to feel refreshed, and they're going to go even farther. When they get a concession that gives them a bit of a taste, it's like a drug addict needing a fix. Every concession they get, it gives them a taste. It takes them out of withdrawal. It strengthens them. So your small concessions that you think are there for goodwill to give in, actually makes them hungrier for more. Makes them easier to last longer. If Haitian kidnapping, if a partial payment happened to be paid on a Thursday or a Friday, now they're like, okay, well, we got enough to party for the weekend. We're going to go through this weekend. We're going to start all over again on Monday. We're going to go back to trying to wear them out. So you got to be careful about concessions, because it makes them hungrier for more.
Is there any way, and we'll wrap up this, Chris, is there any way to time block the negotiation period? I mean, for me, with a surgeon, you could tie it up the best you can and get the surgeon on board to say he or she needs that equipment on a certain date. So at least you've got an end goal to aim for. Obviously, you work back from delivery and payment processing and all that kind of stuff, and invoicing and POs. Is there a way to do that if you don't have that scenario? Is there a way to go into the conversation, and clearly if you demand that it's got to be done on a certain date, it's a point of leverage for them to push it back as far as possible because it's control of the conversation. So is there any tactics, even in the hostage or kidnapping scenario, that you would use to block out the time that you've got here to do the negotiations?
Well, for me, I'm just going to take the attitude as I've got all day. I've got as much time as possible. So short answer is no. You can't put a deadline on them. That's a piece of information for them that they're actually going to like. It's going to give them more of a feel for how far they could push you. They're going to be smart enough to know that if you put a deadline on the conversation, it's going to be the old phrase, is that when you need it or when you want it? Well, that means you're going to put a deadline on it from when you want it, not necessarily when you need it. So they know that they know there's more time behind any deadline that you put out there, because you're never going to put a deadline on yourself that's your own hard full stop deadline. So that's one of those things. If you try to put a deadline on it, you only put pressure on yourself.
Interesting. And I guess if they're smart enough, they'll know when your company's year of end is. They'll know perhaps when your target year end is, and things like that. And I know and looking back, obviously it was an amateur move, but I sometimes, with procurement officers that I thought I had a good relationship with, I would go in and say, look, if I get this in before Christmas, me and you are going out for drinks after the fact on the back of the commissions. But again, that might be information that's better kept to yourself versus giving them more leverage. And with that, Chris, just to wrap up, I've got one final question. I've asked it you a couple of times now, and I'm going to ask you again. So it'll be interesting to see if your answer is different from the previous occasions. And that is...
It's a test.
No, it's fine for you to change and grow and develop over time, mate. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
I'm not sure if this is my same answer, but I'd be nicer. I mean, I'd be a little slower to react negatively, and ideally not react negatively at all. You take the same approaches, have the same ideas, but just be nicer about it, so that took it a little bit easier on people.
Interesting. You said something similar on a previous show, and just to dive into that just slightly, is this something that you've learned to sort of experience and age over time, or is this something that you saw positive benefits of within negotiations or whatever it was that enabled you to say, the end net result of being just neutral at worst versus getting hot-headed and putting emotion into things where it doesn't need to be, that led to better results, and so that's why you started doing it?
Yeah, both. better results. They feel better. I feel better. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been in meetings where I really kind of slammed people in government meetings a long time ago, and was sort of proud of myself for slamming them. And then the penalties I paid long term over that was like, this just was not worth it. And on top of that, if I'm mad enough to slam somebody in a conversation, I mean, I don't feel good about it. Neither do they. The toxic residue is bad emotionally.
Interesting. Well, that's food for thought for the audience. With that, Chris, tell us a little bit about the book, because clearly that is the next step for anyone who enjoyed this episode and wants to learn more about negotiations, both in the world of hostages and in the world of business as well. And then tell us where we can find out more about you as well.
I gotta tell you, I'm getting so much feedback from salespeople in particular that they don't think Never Split the Difference is a negotiation book. They think it's a sales book. I got an email the other day from a lady on LinkedIn. She hit her numbers 139% of her number. And she said, I attribute it to the stuff that I learned from your book, Never Split the Difference. So you pick it up on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon's always got the best price. And you know what? Take it a step further. Subscribe to our newsletter, The Edge. You can pick it up off our website, blackswanltd.com. Black like the color, swan with one N, LTD like limited. Sign up for the newsletter. It's free. The Edge comes out once a week. Plus, it's also a pipeline to all the other training that we give and a lot of other information that we give out to help people get better. And the newsletter's free, and we'll give out a lot of other free stuff too.
Good stuff. Well, I'll link to all of that in the show notes to this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. That, Chris, thank you again for coming on the show, your insights on this, because some of this was counterintuitive. I'm scribbling down notes here that I'm going to be using moving forward with the deals that I'm doing as kind of they get bigger and more corporate as the show grows. And so I appreciate that on a personal level. I know the audience appreciate it as well. And I want to thank you for joining us again on the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks, Will. An absolute pleasure.